presentation of all of this material, he presents the fact that certain witnesses at the nearby Gross-Rosen concentration camp would see this kind of acorn device glowing a pale blue glow, levitating above the tree line at night, and he concluded that was a bell, and I think he's probably right. And here's the problem. All it does is levitate. It goes up and it comes down. It doesn't, it doesn't zigzag around in the sky like UFOs have been reported to do. So you're dealing, I think, here with, perhaps a prototypical,
highly experimental,
high energy experimental thing.
And would it have been for propulsion, or could it have been for any number of other things? I would wonder, right?
Well, the problem here is, you can use it for propulsion, but it's killing everybody. The first time they test this thing, it zaps, some of the scientists testing it into the nether realms. So you've got a device here that, is clearly some sort of prototypical technology, but it's not flying around. They can't put anybody in it to pilot it or steer it, and it still has to be connected to this honking big electrical plant. So we can say that, this is kind of a step in the technology tree, but it's not to the stage that we get Haunebu and Vril-craft, flying around and flying to the moon and back and so on and so forth. No, it's not that at all.
So can I just ask you, the bell, that's an interesting possibility. It seems to me that despite the fact that it's kind of sketchy in terms of the evidence, you have one guy's testimony after World War II talking about it. I get the feeling that you give that at least some reason for credibility, as opposed to Vril or Haunebu type craft, which, am I right in thinking you're not really impressed by the likelihood of them? Well, I'm not.
The difference here is that with the Bell story, and it's not just Sporenberg's testimony, there's a number of contextual things that indicate that the story has some traction. You've got Kurt Davis, who eventually comes to this country, goes to work for NASA. He was clearly working for a plasma project of some sort for the German firm that was actually building the equipment of the Bell, and so on and so forth. So you've got little contextual indicators that kind of surround the core of the story that indicate that it does have some traction. The problem with the Haunebu and Vril stuff is, if you look at it, all of those details are missing. There's no way that you can go back and try and reconstruct a kind of a putative physics and engineering and personnel.
And just so people have context about what he's referring to when he says Vril. So the Vril Society were, and forgive me if I don't explain this perfectly, everyone, but essentially there's a group of extremely beautiful young women, apparently, who were allegedly able to make contact with an ET group through some form of mediumship or channeling, and were able to then actually have sessions, and the beings would describe themselves, describe where they came from, and describe the craft, how to design it, and all these kind of things. And apparently the Third Reich and the Nazis got wind of this, brought in all the women, asked them, questioned them about this, and then said, basically, keep doing what you're doing, and kind of let them keep doing their thing. That's, like Farrell's saying, that's a little bit tougher to prove exactly on multiple accounts. So he doesn't take those things. These are just what people know. And this is, to each his own. If you believe this, it's I'm not here to shoo or be dogmatic, but I'm just kind of giving people the groundwork and what is the most concrete evidence we have, and just say when it's not as concrete, this isn't as concrete. So
can I just say something about the Vril? Oh yeah, you wanted to go on that because the Vril, just talking about what the Vril are, is pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's if you want to add any 2 cents, but essentially, very much into the occult, and was one of these early medium group that made contact with allegedly an ET intelligence.
Yeah, so I mean, I heard about this a long time ago with Michael Tessarian. He's one of my earlier favorite researchers who really dug deep into this, and he is the one who first got me turned on to the book called The Coming Race by Edward Bulwer Lytton, and that was published in 1871. And so basically, and this is just on Wikipedia, which I don't, keep as dogma, but it actually does a pretty good job here. Some readers have believed the account of a superior subterranean master race. So it's not extraterrestrial, it's subterranean master race called the Vril, and that's the coming race. And he speaks about this race coming from under the ground, and so this was an actual belief. And Theosophists, you guys might know Theosophy, Madame Helena Blavatsky, as well as Rudolf Steiner, who started as a Theosophist and went to Anthroposophy and built Anthroposophy. they basically accepted the story as occult truth. And these were people that were coming in saying that there were a lot of ancient mystery schools within, or secret societies within, elder religions like Tibetan Buddhists, in the in ancient India, that Helena Blavatsky connected with, like secret masters that had understood that there were more races on the planet than just humans.
Right.
And that they don't just come from elsewhere in the galaxy, but a lot of them come from underneath the ground. There are Native American myths that even go into subterranean master races, maybe not master races, but subterranean races, insectoid, ant-like people.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
and
this is something that had been going on for a while, even before World War II.
Right. And as you're pointing out, not only indigenous cultures, but there's a lot of different, schools of thought and ways that these certain figures and entities come about, and some will be more surprising than others. I'm curious, do you know if the Nazi symbol itself is actually an ancient Indian or Tibetan symbol, correct? It's a Sanskrit symbol. Do you know if that is in any way related to the Vril, and was like, do you know if there's any through line with that?
Not specifically with the swastika, but if you go back to the Thule Society, like you ever seen Thule brand of on top of your van? Well, the Thule Society, and this is again, almighty Google is telling me this. Originally, the Studian group, I think it's it's basically a German occultist and group found in Munich shortly after World War I, named after a mythical northern country in Greek legend. So that would be Thule. Mm-hmm. And so when you look that up, when you just type in Thule Society, Third Reich on Google, you'll see the swastika as their logo there. But it was founded in 1918.
But if the Third Reich
that
is
symbol
using
goes
that
way back in Tibetan Buddhism. You'll see it thousands of years ago in India. You'll see Native American symbols that very well represent not just something that could be the sun, but something that has spin. Because that's the thing about the swastika, is it's showing you a cross in spin, from a certain direction. And so that's
has to do with photons or something subatomic.
And there's also something about the direction of the spin. Right. So apparently the Nazi symbol corrected the direction of the spin from either clockwise to counterclockwise or something along those lines.
And in no way are we endorsing neo-Nazism, just for the record.
No, we're showing
everyone.
The history of the symbols.
Yeah.
Like if
and how this idea of co-opting in a way, but why would they, the fact that the Thule Society, this was their symbol, and then the entire Third Reich used that same symbol, shows you, it seems like they really were giving a lot of credence to the Thule Society, or the Thule Society might have had a stronger impact than we realized. I don't know the through line. I don't know if Hitler actually attended meetings with the Thule Society, but it's kind of strange that they use that symbol,
Yeah, well, there's a good book called Hammer of the Gods, The Thule Society and the Birth of Nazism, that kind of shows the progression into it. But it's really good to mention people like Jamie Wheel from the Flow Genome Project just wrote the book Recapture the Rapture, and he's talking about how we can recapture ecstasis, meaning psychedelics, tantra, these things that really turn us on, but they're like fire. You can't have it all the time, as ways of not being culty, and how do you not turn it into a cult? But the thing is today, somebody like, a beautiful mind like a Charles Eisenstein could come up with some kind of philosophy about how we should do things. And everyone seems to be like, this is beautiful. My God, this is incredible. We all need to rush towards it. And it's gift society, and it's all about bringing your inner gifts out. And then all of a sudden, in 5 years, there's a war. And there's a whole movement that Charles had nothing to do with. That's all like, well, in Charles's philosophy, he talks about how we're going to implement gift society and do it by coercion, and like turn it into what everyone feared would be just a socialist regime anyway. And so then you say like, oh man, Charles Eisenstein like was onto some very crappy stuff, and then you're like, no, this is like the same thing as like Christianity is rooted in gnosis or in Gnosticism. But when you read the Bible, you're not reading about Gnosticism. And you're thinking, I'm learning about Christ. I'm all into Christianity because it's all in reverence to Christ. But most of what Christianity goes on to do over the next couple thousand years is not something that Christ would actually, and I'm not going to speak for Christ energy, but it was perverted from there, just like science. Science is great. What the institutions of science do are not perfect. So this is what I mean about that symbol specifically. What we're doing is we're showing that these symbols, like the swastika, has a spiritual root thousands of years ago. Just like if somebody were to make a tree symbol, the tree of life symbol, and then go out and murder 1 million people with that symbol on their back, it's going to charge that symbol very, very delicately. So we're trying to tease apart, where did this come from? And what I'm getting at here is this isn't all for nothing. Is occultism has been a very pregnant way of getting things done in politics, even after the separation of church and state. And so after the separation of church and state, where church shall have no authority over the rational mind, it was really this Enlightenment period where it was like the separation of the two at least allows you to be the human, and you can access any religion if you want, but it's not going to have like I'm speaking for God and therefore I'm passing this law, which is beautiful. But where did all that power go? Some of it was killed off for sure, but a lot of it was pushed underground. So you'll see a lot of Knights Templar kind of mythology mixed in with what the Third Reich picked up. So you see a lot of occultism. And the main thing that I'm arriving at here is when you were saying prior to World War II, like, man, they were working on this crazy stuff in World War II. How did they know about this back then? What were they given? Were they given something from an extraterrestrial or subterranean race? And there's at least some work from Michael Tessarian who talks about Sir John Dee of the Tudor dynasty. He was, he was a sorcerer. He was an alchemist. He was dabbling in the mysteries and alchemy and working with chemicals, altered consciousness, staring into a scrying mirror, which is obsidian that was taken from Montezuma. Just weird stuff. But if you think about it, using what we would say today as being the modern pseudoscience, look into quantum physics, manifestation, all that kind of science, which there is a science around it, was being used in occultism and to access information that may have been accessible. And some, like Michael Tessarian, say that a lot of information that began to be worked on, like fission and fusion in the 1900s, that was stuff that was awoken inside of seances from Sir John Dee. So this is just a story. Obviously, there's so much context I won't go into it. But what I'm saying is there must have been some contact and access to higher information, because it wasn't all just people shivering in their thatch roofed huts back then.
Well, we know
there was some higher knowledge,
and we know the Nazis. I mean, obviously the famous Indiana Jones movie. The Nazis, or the Hunt for the Holy Grail, like. That's based off of like the Nazis were really into this stuff. They were really going all over the world hunting, rare artifacts and looking at ancient sites. And even if they didn't actually make contact with, some actual off-planet intelligence, they just really were obsessed with this stuff. And so they were trying to recreate it, like we said, with no holds bar. I mean, they had no limitations. So if we're going to do a seance to try to do this, we'll do a seance. If we're going to throw some innocent guy into a chamber to test this, we'll do that. So there was nothing holding them back from a mental, like, it was just do whatever you can to get some sort of scientific success was really the goal. We just want to outpace and have more power, control, and capability than our opponents. And a lot of times, war, this was at wartime, still was going on. So it's the biggest incentive. You're literally at war. So you're using all, look what countries do at wartime. They do amazing things. They come together, but also they can do amazingly horrible things.
Part of Vitkovsky's story that's very, very helpful, I think.
So this is just Farrell finishing, saying, though, that he believes this one specific story about the bell, but doesn't put as much credence behind the Vril or the... He
specifically identifies various scientists that he thinks were involved with this project and why they were involved with it. With the Hanobu and Vril story, you don't have that. You've just got...
So he's just drawing a through line between the strong forensic evidence with the Bell story versus the Vril and the Hanabu story.
Pictures, which I think are probably photoshopped, and you've got diagrams that tell you exactly nothing about any of the physics that may have been involved.
That has always been my feeling. Like when you look into these other stories, and for anyone who's not quite aware, the Hanabu and Vril stories are more variations of German flying saucer type technologies that allegedly go back even decades before the rise of Hitler in some cases. And I've just never seen really strong evidence to work with to support it. If there was evidence, I would feel differently.
Make sure y'all head over to benjosephstewart.com, become a member. You'll have access to the growing library of deeper dives where I talk about all the stuff that I really can't talk about on YouTube. Make sure you get involved in the Discord chat. That's where a lot of the conversation is happening, talking about new theories, being able to interweave into the greater conversation that is how we awaken infinity. That's our highest potential. And I just want to remind you, you are the most powerful technology ever known to creation. Wield it like an artist with a conscience.